Hello book lovers and welcome to another episode of the Monday Book Club. This week I've got a very good book for you. It's the first dystopian science fiction novel ever written, and when I read it, it quickly became one of my personal favourite books ever. So let's not delay things, let's get straight into it. This is Yevgeny Zamyatin's Soviet dystopian novel, We. In 1921, Soviet Russia banned its first book. It was a small book, around 250 pages long, and were it published now, we might look at it as relatively harmless. But at the time, this little book was a big deal. The book is We, the first dystopian science fiction novel, and it has been making big waves ever since. Yevgeny Zamyatin, the author of We, is arguably the first Soviet dissident. After he'd witnessed the Soviet Revolution in Russia and seen how the Bolsheviks had taken over a rebellion that was not theirs to begin with, he quickly became disenchanted with the new communist era of his country. He saw what the end result of this new regime could be, and he described it in his novel. The Soviet bureaucracy were not kind to his work. They saw it for the political commentary on their regime that it clearly was, and they banned it. Zamyatin described the banning of the novel as akin to death for a writer and wrote to Stalin to request exile, which was granted. Prior to this, and much to the anger of the Soviet regime, Zamyatin had smuggled a copy of We out to America, where it was published in New York in 1924. No doubt the government's anger at this helped Zamyatin's case when he asked to be exiled from the country. Many novels have been written because of We. Its influence is enormous. Without We, there could be no Brave New World. There would be no 1984. To a greater or lesser extent, the current wave of dystopian teen fiction, headed by the likes of the Hunger Games, would not exist without We, since they are all playing in the sandbox that Zamyatin created with this novel. To an extent, that has diluted the core message of the book. This is a story that we have now seen many times and in many forms, so when you come to read it as a modern reader, a lot of its core themes will be quite familiar to you. I often found myself wondering when reading this book whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. Is it good that we can still pick up a novel that is 95 years old and still be able to feel so familiar with its setting? Or is it a bad thing because that kind of makes you feel like you're familiar with it because the world has become more like it? It's an unnerving thought. The story is set in a post-apocalyptic future, or at least that's what the main character seems to believe. Whatever the exact origin of the setting is ultimately irrelevant. The society of one state exists, and its peoples are brainwashed slaves to its ruler, known as the benefactor. Everyone is happy, everyone is productive, and one state is wonderful. That's what our main character, D503, because no one has a name anymore, everyone's just a number, believes, anyway. One state is the name given to the nation in the Penguin translation from the 90s that I read. It's generally regarded as one of the best, if not the best, English translations that you can get your hands on, and if you read this book, I highly recommend that this is the version that you pick up. There are other translations, and the foreword to this book explains why some names have been altered in this version to make the names of things better fit the story. It's all very interesting from a linguistic point of view. Now, our protagonist begins the story blissfully happy with his existence. He has a good friend, a lover whom he sees frequently, and a job that he adores. He's recently built an enormous rocket ship that is going to take the peoples of one state out into the cosmos, and the benefactor has invited anyone who wishes to do so to submit written works about how wonderful one state is to be placed on the rocket so that any alien species that the ship encounters during its flight will know how wonderful one state is. D503 begins writing a diary of sorts about his life, because that way the alien species will understand one state and, in his view, be grateful when they are absorbed into one state themselves. At no point does he consider that the aliens will not want to be part of one state. He just assumes that when they see how great it is, they will accept their cultural uplifting and become efficient numbers themselves. This is where the horror of the story begins to sink in. One state is a cult in just about every way imaginable, and it's a dangerous cult at that. There is no freedom. At one point, D503 discusses how this is a good thing, and there is no end to the slavery that each member of this cult is subjected to. Sleeping is regimented at set times. Eating is regimented at set times. There are a few hours each day for personal time, but, again, it is highly regimented and not at all personal. Every wall, Every floor is made from transparent glass. There is no privacy, save for a brief, pre-approved hour for sex, and even then only with a pre-approved partner. Tickets for sex must be handed to a building overseer who essentially runs the lives of the numbers in their building. Outside these buildings, the Guardians act as a secret and not-so-secret police, uncovering dissident groups and sentencing them to death in a device called the Benefactor's Machine, following a show trial that all numbers attend. And yes, there are dissidents. The main antagonist of the story, I-330, is one such dissident. She uses sex to get what she wants, because she knows it will work. She's alluring. She's something of a femme fatale character, and she is utterly, utterly abhorrent. I-330 may have a plan for what's going to happen once she and her allies destroy one state, but it's never properly explained, because she simply doesn't bother to fill in D503 on the plan. This is because she is so immeasurably paranoid that she doesn't trust him even when he is literally throwing himself at her, pleading with her to allow him to be with her. Instead, she is content to use sex, and thus the overwhelming desire that she instills in D503 to manipulate him into doing whatever she wants. She plays with his emotions, and it's horribly apparent that she's enjoying stringing him along as she bends him to her will. I'm sure we've all met someone in real life who acts like this, either to ourselves or to someone that we know, and Zamyatin so expertly brings despicable people like this to life in I-303. But here's the twist. For all her lack of a clear goal, for all her manipulations and her devious, self-centered actions, I-303 is the closest that this book has to a standard good guy character. It becomes painfully obvious by the end of the novel that I-303 can't have fully fleshed out her plan for what life will be like after one state falls, because one state has existed for so long that nobody alive even has the slightest clue how to live in a world without one state. It's so ingrained that any future society will, at its core, be based on the cult that birthed it. One state is the true villain of this story. The benefactor may be running a slave nation, but the implications are clear that even he is a victim of this cult, and the steady progress that one state is making toward turning every living being into a machine-like entity devoid of personal thought is entirely out of his control. So you can understand why the Soviets would be incensed by this novel. This is, at its heart, a look at how Soviet Russia could have ended up if the extreme parts of its origin were able to maintain control in the long term. It's a communist nightmare from within communism itself, and the anger of the author is clearly felt. Yevgeny Zamyatin was a master writer, and this novel, whether read as a political novel or as science fiction, is an undisputed masterpiece. If you read one novel this year, make sure it's We. So there you have it. Like I said, it's one of my personal favourites. It's very short, about 250 pages. You can probably read it in a day if you've got a couple of hours to spare, and it is amazing. It's one that's stuck with me ever since I finished reading it, and I have to say I just love it. So I do recommend it. But anyway, that really is all we've got time for today. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you did like this, and if you did, remember to click the like button. Share it with your friends so that they can see a good book too, and do subscribe for future videos because there will be more in the future. But until next time, I've been Zoe Kirk-Robinson. You've been watching the Monday Book Club, and I'll see you later.